Hello and welcome to this special edition of Suits and Boots, the TDI Sustainability podcast series in conjunction with the Investing in Africa Mining Indaba. In this series, speakers at the 2026 Mining Indaba event discuss some of the key themes that will be covered at the conference. I'm Ashton Stewart Carter, Executive Chair at TDI Sustainability. So welcome to today's episode where we're exploring how large-scale mining projects can be designed as engines of economic development, perhaps not an obvious proposition. We'll be looking at shared prosperity, the role of mineral corridors, infrastructure-led industrialization, and the mindset shifts needed from investors, governments, and companies to deliver this long-term inclusive impact. I'm pleased to be joined for today's discussion by Safiatou Diallo, who is the General Manager for Regional Economic Development and Strategy at Rio Tinto, Guinea. Rather than summarize Safiatou's impressive resume, I'll let her tell her own story in just a little while. So first, a very big welcome to Safiatou.
Thank you, Ashton. It's a pleasure to join this conversation. I am currently the General Manager for Regional Economic Development for Rio Tinto, Guinea. And prior to joining the industry, I have worked in the public sector for Guinea, but also in international development organizations, primarily leading development work around economic opportunities, which have actually prepared me to contribute to this broader agenda within the mining industry.
Safiatou, you've worked in government and you worked in multilateral institutions and now in industry. In just a few sentences, tell me, what is your role at Rio Tinto? What does a GM for Regional Economic Development and Strategy do? And how did you get here?
Thank you, Ashton. It's really a pleasure to join you on this conversation. Well, regional economic development at Rio Tinto, for me, it's really supporting from the very beginning the impact of the Simandou Project in terms of contributing to the regional development of the Simandou corridor. And with the team, the work that we do is really trying to set and develop economic opportunities that can really last long after the mine, long after the exploitation of the mine.
Great, and this obviously requires, or I think it must require, quite a lot of different disciplines. This isn't about mining. This isn't mineral engineering. This isn't just about community relations. This isn't external affairs. This is sort of everything together, economic development, the whole bundle. How did you get to this position? What disciplines did you have to bring to it? And explain what you think are the skills needed to make sure this is a success.
Well, look, Ashton, I actually have moved my career throughout, government, development institutions, and now here I'm in industry. Those experiences actually have kind of shaped the way that we are looking at mining today, and it's really a combination of those experiences that basically, from the very beginning, positioned me to understanding that mining only becomes a real development tool when it's plugged into a broader vision. And it has to be one that is aligned with economic diversification to support, the transformation effort and the transformation agenda. And that's what we are actually trying to do through the Simandou Project. So we are aiming not just to build a mine, but really building a long-term value for communities through infrastructure, jobs, skills, and new economic opportunities outside of the mining. And it's really that mindset that is at the heart of our regional economic development strategy. So it's really making sure that a project of this scale can really unlock broader economic growth along the corridor, especially in remote rural areas.
Great. And you mentioned the word corridor. I'm going to come to that in a little bit, and maybe unpack that a little bit more. But it sounds like what you're doing here is almost inventing, or you are participating in a new discipline at mining projects. This isn't taught at mining school or in universities. It's really a combination of different skills, talents, and experiences that you built up over the years that you got to bring to bear. So is this a signal that mining is no longer just digging stuff out of the ground and transporting it and processing it? Is this what we're talking about at the mining Indaba when we talk about community prosperity? Is this putting more of a responsibility on the mining companies?
Yeah, so let me just start with kind of like setting the scene here. So we recently conducted, you mentioned the word corridor, recently conducted a study to basically define the geographic scope of what we call the economic corridor of the Simandou. And turns out that it represents 20% of Guinea's surface area. More than 75% of which is rural. We're talking about close to 2 million people on that corridor, 54% under 18. So based on that, you see that the opportunities are really striking, and we have to take into account those facts from the very beginning to really make sure that Simandou, being Africa's largest integrated mine and infrastructure development project, is really well positioned to contribute to the regional development agenda that Guinea has set. So we cannot really do this in the traditional way. And we also have to remember that 3 to 4 years ago, this part of Guinea that we are talking about was completely locked from an infrastructure perspective. And here today, we have a mine that obviously will produce high-grade iron ore. But the real game changer is really when you put everything together, meaning 600 kilometers of multi-user railway, a new port, with the potential, tangible actually now, of opening regions that have never had this level of connectivity before. And therefore, when you combine all of this with the scale of this project, the expected economic impact is really the increase, for instance, of Guinea's GDP by up to 55%, 1.4 billion a year in government revenues, thousands of jobs. We're already working with more than 900 Guinean businesses. So with all of this, you would agree that Simandou operates on a completely different scale, and it is truly positioned as a catalyst for regional transformation, with the potential to have spillover effects actually along the corridor, but also across the country. So Simandou is not just a mining asset. It's really a new way of operating and a new way of doing sustainable business.
So that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, the question I was going to ask is what is different about Simandou, and you partly answered that in terms of the scale, not a unique differentiator, but it's certainly a notable characteristic. It's a vast scale. But I'm also interested in the last comment you made that mining, or Simandou isn't just a mining project, because it sounds like it's, from your point of view, from the seat you're sitting in, this is like a regional development project. And you're having to sort of understand what is going to be the regional development opportunities and make sure that they happen. Is that right? And I guess the question I have is, why is that the responsibility of Simandou?
Well, I think, and I want to say that it's actually a shared responsibility. As you know, Simandou is a partnership. It's a partnership with, with different stakeholders, and for the part that we are all trying to work together. When you take this corridor and, outside of the mining sector, you are investing in areas like agriculture, vocal training for young people and women, access to affordable basic social services, or better urban planning, actually, as a starting point. This is really creating the conditions for long-term economic resilience along the corridor, and a resilience that actually continues well beyond the construction phase of this project. And I think that's where the government, the mining companies that are involved in Simandou jointly understand what's at stake here, and also understand that shared prosperity or shared value starts when people can actually build stable livelihoods around the project and not just beside it. So that's where the shared responsibility, I think, comes from.
And I think you're pointing out this isn't just a compliance exercise. Some of these things that you're doing aren't going to be found in the mining code or in the regulations. These are things that you have to think about yourself in order to operate in this context.
Yes, absolutely, Ashton. I mean, from what we are seeing across the industry, I mean, communities are no longer satisfied with just being informed or consulted, right? They really want to see real, tangible opportunities and lasting opportunities. And obviously that changes everything. I mean, they understand nowadays that the resource will not last forever, but it's actually the opportunities that stem from exploiting the resources. Those are the ones that can really create a long-lasting impact for them.
Yeah, so in that participation hierarchy, from informed being the kind of weakest form of participation to decision making being the highest form of participation, the communities are expecting now to move further towards the decision making and sharing benefits. And perhaps we can turn to that. We're seeing nowadays that in the mining sector that the financial models that are emerging are more about shared prosperity and revenue sharing. And how do you go about that in terms of managing expectations and sharing responsibility and revenue with the different stakeholders around Simandou? What are some of the workable models you've managed to put in place or had the potential to be successful, should I say, as we're just at the beginning of this journey?
Well, with Simandou, I think or even more in general, the models that really blend public and private investment, around a shared infrastructure investment are those that have the strongest impact. And here, the multi-user railway, a port being developed basically to serve not only mining, but also, as I've mentioned previously, agriculture, trade, and the opportunity for future industries. It's really this type of models that unlock economic opportunities far beyond the extractive sector, especially in landlocked rural areas like we can see in this part of the world. And this is really also what reduces risks, align incentives, and ensure local benefits are built into the structure of this type of models. So I think it's really having these sorts of co-developed infrastructures that can be a game changer in the industry.
Got it. And so let's talk about corridors. Conceptually, corridors are a fantastic idea. From my kind of point of view, you can sort of see how the infrastructure can stitch together, how you can have a spatial planning exercise to drive economic development, and potentially there's a peace dividend as it crosses national borders. But tell me a little bit from your point of view how replicable you think are corridors, and whether they really are going to be the success story that everybody hopes. We've heard a lot of talk about the Lobito corridor, of course. Be very grateful to hear some of your reflections on corridors being in the middle of one.
Well, at least we do hope that this corridor will be successful. And one way of really doing that is, by ensuring the railway, the port, the systems, that everything brought together is reliable and designed to serve multiple users, actually. And it's really that combination that will help unlock a much broader economic activity. And it's in that sense, actually, that Simandou is come across as a unique project, because the rail is not only there to move iron ore, it's really opening entire areas that were previously hard to reach. And suddenly you do have farmers who can get their products to the market. Local traders will have the opportunity to move their goods more efficiently, and services will develop that were almost impossible before. Like healthcare consultation, training programs, digital access can finally reach rural areas. And when that kind of infrastructure truly unlocks a region, when government, partners, and local communities pull in the same direction, something really close to magic happens. That's when it happens. Places that felt isolated start to feel connected, start to feel alive, and really full of new possibilities. So I think it's really when all those things are put together that these corridors can really be successful and can really be the game changer that we are talking about. And I am really hopeful and confident that working all together, this is something that we can really achieve with Simandou.
And you talked about, and I think you're absolutely right, that when everybody pulls together, then you've got the best chance of success for all, for the collective, which talks to the governance and the overall strategy. How do you manage the governance of all these different moving parts? Simandou can't control them all, and you talk a lot about partnerships. Is this underneath the governance of the government, or is this through the partnership model?
It has to be a partnership model. I mean, as you know, it's a shared infrastructure with fully shared and sometimes equally shared responsibilities. So the miners, the government, all have to come together to really make this work. And this is where basically if we go back to like a corridor that is built with one single purpose, then it's the risk is to stay purely into an extractive model, and we've seen that in different parts of the world. But once again, if you build a project, especially of this scale, around partnership, around strong partnership with really shared responsibility, that's where planners, partners can really have a broader impact. And that's when corridors such as the Simandou can really start to change the regions or a region economic rhythm and pave the way for broader transformation and development.
And you and I are going to the investing in mining in Indaba next week, and the investing part of that, they also need to be partners in this. And if there's investment opportunities in other sectors than mining, in the agriculture and the infrastructure, what is your message then to the investment community, which is outside of the traditional mining sources of financing? should they see this as a development opportunity as well and a financing opportunity to invest into agriculture and infrastructure, transport, manufacturing, processing, and so on?
Yes. So first of all, I want to say that I think governments and investors each have a very clear role to play. Actually, governments create the conditions, the land use planning, the open access rules, the incentives that really make it possible for corridors to support agriculture or manufacturing or trade. And on the investor side, the responsibility is indeed to build an infrastructure, first of all, that is reliable, most importantly, that is safe and genuinely open, to multi users. And it's really, once again, when those two, when they come together, that's when a corridor stops being just a line on a map. It really becomes a living economic artery that creates a stable social and business environment. So the message really at Indaba, and I guess if there is really one mindset shift that I would love to hear more, it's really how do we go, how do we extract responsibly towards how do we use mining as a catalyst for shared prosperity?
And I think what you're saying, I think what I'm hearing the theme in your remarks is that the infrastructure that is put in place at mining projects or mineral development projects is as important as the actual kind of extraction infrastructure that is necessary to develop the mineral reserve in terms of its development potential. So maybe what you're saying is that mining companies should think of themselves as infrastructure projects and how that can be designed to catalyze regional economic development.
Yes, absolutely, Ashton. I mean, for me, mining shouldn't be the end of the story. It should really be the beginning of something bigger that fosters future generational opportunities. And coming from the Republic of Guinea, being a Guinean working on the Simandou Project in regional economic development, I have seen, and I will hopefully keep seeing, how powerful it can be when investment reaches beyond the mine itself, when it strengthens the people, when you have services, rural economies that develop, when mining becomes a catalyst for long-term inclusive growth. I mean, the kind that lifts communities and supports a more resilient region. I think, once again, building on partnerships around integrated infrastructure, that's something we can achieve together. And that's why this mindset shift matters so much.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think many people would agree with you that this is, and you can show where this has happened, that mining has actually been the catalyst for regional development. I guess the question is, how do you initiate that? How do you get that started with all the constraints that you have? And Simandou is certainly looking like an exemplar for that. And your last point actually reminds me of Mark Moody Stewart, who's the former CEO of Anglo American, and then previously chairman of Anglo American, and previously CEO of Shell. He always saw the mindset shift as being that mining companies shouldn't see themselves as the center of a stakeholder mapping, but one of the stakeholders, in the middle of which is the mineral development opportunity itself. And once you see it like that, that you are an equal stakeholder in this mineral development, then it's easy to see the path forward to catalyze that change that you envision for projects like Simandou.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would fully agree with that. From my perspective, especially working on regional economic development, the shift starts with the designing of the mining projects, as actually a platforms for broader growth, and not just as isolated projects. And this has to be part of really the way we design the projects, the way they are financed, the capacity of public institutions, and the expectations investors bring. All of that actually must evolve together so that we can reach these results and these impacts that we are talking about.
Fantastic. So, last question I have, and this is a sort of crystal ball question. You probably have your crystal ball in your left-hand pocket. So if you take that out and give that a quick shine, looking ahead 5 years, 10 years, what do you think needs to change to have the mining projects in Africa come closer towards your vision that you are implementing at Simandou? What do you think are some of the shifts that need to happen? I guess we talked about the mind shift, but what else needs to happen? Or maybe that's it. Maybe we just need to go out and shift minds.
Well, I think that it has to start with the mind. Once we have the mindset, then we have to integrate that into the way we design the projects. We can no longer design, sole source users projects. We can no longer design only extractive projects. We need to design projects that takes into account the context where we operate. We have to design projects that takes into account the communities where we operate. We have to take into account these new models, these new financing models, these new partnership models, where each stakeholder actually find the benefits for them. Because at the end of the day, to be able to promote development in these specific countries, we really have to incorporate that in the initial design of the project. And that's where mining really becomes a catalyst for long-term and inclusive growth.
Well, thanks so much. I mean, sadly, I think I'm going to have to draw that to a close. But what I've taken away from that is, first of all, we've got to have a mind shift that mining managers, executives have got to see the potential of mines to be a catalyst for regional development. But context is everything, of course. Everywhere is different, even though the principles might transcend those different contexts. Partnerships are essential because if we're going to catalyze regional development, there's no way that you can do this alone. So that skill to develop partnerships is going to be kind of fundamental. Also, that what a mine can do actually is begin thinking about the infrastructure that it's putting in place and how that can be a shared resource, a shared asset from which prosperity can grow. And then lastly, if you have all that, then when you're designing your project, right from the outset, designed for development. And we might actually be able to demonstrate very clearly that mining is a driver of sustainable development, not a drag on it.
Assheton, I just want to add one final word. I think if and when we choose to see mining as a platform for transformation rather than just production, it really creates something essential. And that something essential is hope. And that hope is what truly opens the door to a shared prosperity future. And I deeply hope and believe that Simandou will support the economic transformation we ambition in Guinea and for Guineans.
Perfect. That's a great addition. So thank you once again to our speaker, Safiatou Diallo, for joining us today. And to our listeners, please check out the rest of this special series of Mining Indaba podcasts on the TDI Suits and Boots podcast channel. I look forward to seeing you all and to seeing Safiatou at the event in February. Well, we are in February, seeing you all next week, in fact, where you can hear from Safiatou on this topic. I'm Ashton Carter, and thank you for listening.